Let's talk about kinetics and rate laws. All of these are concerned with the speed of reactions. When we look at how fast a reaction occurs, there is a wide range of speed of reactions. I can have reactions that occur in seconds, and I can have others occur in millions of years. So there's an enormous range of time scales. In this unit, we will look at the speed of the chemical reaction, which is called the rate of reaction. We will also look at the reaction mechanism, which is a molecular view of the path from the reactants to the products. So exactly how those molecules orient themselves to collide with each other and then form products from the reactants. First of all, the nature of reactants. Are the reactants ionic or are they molecular? Because there is a difference. If the reactants are ionic, the speed is going to be very, very quick. And that is because these ions are all ready to react. All that has to happen is the positive lead ion has to touch the negative iodine ion, and when that happens, it forms lead iodide. So this is very, very quick. So when you look at an ionic reaction, it's instantaneous. You take, in this case, two solutions, pour them together, you will instantly form this precipitate, this lead iodide solid. There's no need to go into the nuclear cloud and exchange electrons. Instead, it's just this electrostatic attraction that occurs. Now, in a molecular reaction, the speed is slower. And that is because the covalent molecules need time to rearrange their bonds. So you actually have to have electrons transferred and shared, and those bonds need to be rearranged. The result of this is they take longer in comparison to an ionic reaction. In both the ionic and molecular reactants, they will need some activation energy. And both the ionic and the covalent reactants, they need activation energy. In a molecular reaction, you might get your activation energy would be this much, and that would be for molecular. If it was ionic, it would be lower. So still some activation energy, but just not as much. Again, the activation energy is the energy required to make what's called an activated complex, and that's where in the molecular reaction the bonds are broken and then reformed. For ionic, that activated complex, it's more of they just touch and they have formed products. Two things have to happen with these molecules when they react. They need to collide with the correct orientation, so the molecules need to hit exactly the right place, and they also need to collide with enough force to supply that activation energy. Let's look at concentration of reactions. So compare something that is very concentrated to something that is not as concentrated. More reactants mean there's more collisions if enough energy is present. For gaseous reactants, increasing the pressure also increases the concentration. So here is a little chart showing that the concentration is increased when the pressure is increased. And know that if you're increasing the pressure, you're decreasing the volume. And again, that's increasing the collisions. Increasing the concentration increases the reaction rate. It's because the collisions are sped up. If there's more collisions, there's more of a possibility that those molecules are going to collide in the correct orientation, and again, also with enough activation energy. Let's look at temperature. What does temperature have to do with reaction rates? According to collision theory, when two chemicals react, their molecules have to collide with sufficient energy and with the correct orientation. When you increase the temperature, that increases the reaction rate because you increase both of these, the number of collisions and the force of collisions. The AP board loves to ask this question: how does temperature affect the collisions? And you need to say both of these things. It increases the number of collisions and also the force of collisions when you increase the temperature. So remember that temperature does both things, more collisions and increase the force of collisions. How does surface area affect the reaction rate? Well, we are talking about solids with this because gases don't have surface areas, but the more reactants that can be in contact with each other, then that will increase the reaction rate. And so this is why if you have a solid, you want to crush it up, because crushing it up when you're dissolving it, or if you are reactant with something, it will increase that reaction rate because there's more surface area. Let's look at catalysts. What do catalysts do? Catalysts speed up the reactions by lowering the activation energy. There's an alternative pathway to get from reactants to the products. So what that means is there might be a different cascade of reactions to get from reactants to products. So you can always tell a catalyzed reaction because this little activation energy hill will be lower. So the lower one is for the catalyst. An enzyme is a biological catalyst. So in our bodies, we need to break up the food, and we can't do that with heat because that would cook our cells. So instead, we use enzymes, which are biological catalysts. They will lower the activation energy by causing some alternate pathways to break up that food into the different chemical building blocks that our body needs. There are two types of catalysts. There's a homogeneous catalyst. Homogeneous means that they're all in the same phase. For example, you might have all gases. There's a demonstration that I do in the classroom, and it is homogeneous because it is all in the liquid phase. So you can see right here I have all these little aqueous. That means it's dissolved in solution, and I also have a liquid there. So we are talking about a solution. Everything is in the same phase. This would be a homogeneous catalyst. So in a homogeneous catalyst, you can tell it's a catalyst because you see it enter into the reaction and then it gets spat out. And we'll talk about this later on in the unit, but here we have this catalyst. It enters into the reaction, and then I see that it gets spat out of the reaction. And when you go and add these two equations together, you see that the catalyst is nowhere to be seen. And that's because catalysts are not used up. So they help out with the reaction, but at the end they're spat out. Heterogeneous catalysts mean that they're in a different phase than the reactants. And so a good example would be a solid catalyst with gas reactants, and that occurs in catalytic converters in cars. So in the catalytic converter, there is platinum metal, and the atoms of the platinum are just the right distance and to allow the reactants to sit down on the platinum metal and have a reaction surface. So this is how carbon monoxide is converted into carbon dioxide, which takes a poisonous gas to a non-poisonous gas. So heterogeneous catalysts are all about providing a reaction site so that the molecules can orient themselves correctly so the reaction is quicker. In a biological catalyst or an enzyme, it's more of a lock and key situation. The enzyme provides a site for the molecule to sit down. And a lot of times the molecule sits down and then it causes this enzyme to kind of change shape, and that will encourage the reaction to occur.